Hello, this is ASMR Diesel back with you guys for another POI episode. I am your co-host, C Diesel. I can't even really get in directions because people don't really see us. But just if you're here, imagine to the right of me, I have Professor E, King of the Comics, Ethan Murphy, and to the left of me, I have Lelouch V. How are y'all doing, my brothers?
Confused slightly, but beyond that, I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
I feel very relaxed.
That lasts as we go through this.
That's a great way to start us off there. ASMR, C Diesel, although that's a lot of letters. Yeah. I'm relaxed, man.
Hey,
yeah. How you feeling?
Won't you be my neighbor?
No.
You made Mr. Rogers creepy, man. You made Mr. Rogers
the first
creepy.
line of The Strangers.
Yeah.
Oh god, I think so actually. But let's go ahead and get into this discussion topic for the day, guys. We are going to be covering Mary Sue's today. Ethan, you obviously are the expert. Again, you're the writing savant out of the three of us. Would you please do our fans as well as your two co-hosts a favor and explain what exactly a Mary Sue is?
Right on. The basic breakdown of what a Mary Sue is, it's like an idealized character who is talented at everything and has no meaningful flaws. Now the term Mary Sue originated from a episode of Star Trek, the original Star Trek series, the one that had Shatner and Nimoy. But there's a equivalent for males as well. I forgot what that one is now. But typically, if you have a character that seems too good to be true or too perfect in a series, like a book or a TV show or a movie, whatever it might be, they're referred to as a Mary Sue, and it's usually a negative thing.
So my question being, do you personally see a Mary Sue as a negative thing?
It depends on how it's handled. One of my favorite characters, or a couple of my favorite characters of all times, I would consider Mary Sue's. I would consider Batman, James Bond, and in some capacity, not really Indiana Jones necessarily, but I would definitely consider James Bond and Batman Mary Sue's. And more recently, Wednesday Addams from the Wednesday series on Netflix. But I don't see them as negative characters or bad characters because they do, even though they're really, all of them are good at pretty much everything, they all still fail all the time or get hurt all the time or suffer all the time in the line of duty or whatnot. So it's a flawed Mary Sue, or a Mary Sue that doesn't work is one that's just perfect without really earning their stripes and never seems to have to struggle in any way.
So I'm kind of confused as to why a character like Batman would be considered a Mary Sue. Well, Batman specifically for me, due to the fact he has a lot of mental health issues and a lot of different like conflicts and hypocrisies with his own morality. And again, it's probably the reason for a lot of the things in his city happening. Mm-hmm. So with a Mary Sue, does that not account for personality or things like that? And what aspect do they have to be a perfect individual for them to be Mary Sue?
Typically, it doesn't factor their personality. It is more or less their abilities externally. If you look at like Batman, he is extremely smart. He's extremely capable. He can beat Superman in a fight. He's the world's greatest detective. He's able to outrace anybody in race cars. We've seen that in multiple comic books. He's an extremely handsome guy. He has all kinds of women are after him. It's like all these things. It's like in real life, could anyone do all these things and be this good at all this stuff? Extreme martial artist, it's unlikely. But at the same time, like you mentioned, he is very, very flawed internally. He still loses fights like crazy. He's still not perfect in that sense, but he has externally, he can do a lot of things that would be broken in some capacity for a real person.
All right. So for me, I guess in my head, what I tend to call those characters are characters that have bullshit buttons. To which they're in any scenario they're in, they just can smack this button and they miraculously have a way to handle it, or they already have had a plan to handle it ahead of time. Mm-hmm. But I guess I'll go ahead and direct the same question at you, Mr. Lelouch V, in regards to what are your thoughts on a Mary Sue, and are they a negative to you when it comes to stories?
I mean, in hearing this description, I mean, these were the type of characters that I always related more to, like, being characters that are always prepared no matter what the situation is. I feel like that's more of almost a requirement. Like you got to have at least one character like that in content where there's a team aspect. Like there has to be that character that can teach and convey that information that is missing to the rest of the team to them. That's how I view it, at least. I never really made the connection to make it so like like they were so I guess it's a flaw their perfection. I guess it could make people seem unrelatable.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be my immediate thought process with Mary Sue's, is that they probably are extremely unrelatable, because there's not many people that you can ever really think of that are just always prepared for everything and have every aspect of what it is to be a human being or just a person. They're like great at every aspect. That's just not like, granted, there are people that have a large majority of those things, at least from the outside perspective. They seem to have everything put together, as far as, again, they'll be in the best shape possible. They're very intelligent. They have a lot of skills, but someone like a Jamie Foxx, for example, like dude's just insanely multi-talented at a million different things. I don't know. Like, to me, there's not that many people. There's not that many of those, so I don't know how relatable those types of characters are exactly. Which is why I feel like they tend to be the subject of a lot of discourse and controversy when it comes to like a Batman. Like, people always just putting him in debates about him having bullshit as far as always being prepared, or you know what I mean. You guys get what I mean?
Mm-hmm. No, I feel you. I mean, that's the negative is like you hit the button, not the bullshit, but you hit the button right on the head there, or nail right on the head there, Charlie. As far as a character can be wildly unrelatable to the point where if we're watching it in a movie or a TV show, or you're reading about them in a book or whatnot, if the audience is like, this character seems unbelievable and I can't relate to them, therefore this whole story just doesn't work for me. And I'll call out Star Wars Episode 7. People were, I'm not saying I was doing this, but people were saying that Rey was a bit of a Mary Sue, for example, because she seemed to be good at pretty much anything that came her way with no prior or previous training or knowledge of it. It just kind of everything just kind of came to her. She was able to fly the Millennium Falcon without having flown a ship like that before. She was able to wield a lightsaber to fight, to take on Kylo Ren and beat him without having any real training with a lightsaber before. She was able to use her force to get out of a prison so all these things that kind of, it's like, wait a minute, how does this track? Now, there are ways too that they will oftentimes, a more skilled writer will try to handle it. Going back to Wednesday Addams, she seems to be good at everything in that show, but they have it that she's always reading books, she's always studying things. They even have a scene where she's talking to her father, how her father literally taught her so many things when she was younger. Mm-hmm. So they are trying to give it credibility, but they even, to make it even better, they actually have her losing oftentimes. Even though she knows how to fence, knows how to handle a sword, she still loses in a fight with it. Even though she's very smart and is able to be a detective, she still gets things wrong all the time. So you can have a quote unquote Mary Sue and still have them making mistakes.
So would you say then that has to be a criteria for a good Mary Sue? If you're going to have them be amazing at all these different things, they have to have reasonings or prior history that's indicative of them having those abilities.
I personally would like some credibility to it or some explanation to it. You don't have to do that, but it does make them more relatable, or at least understandable. Like, obviously, no one's gonna be as smart as Sherlock Holmes and can process everything Sherlock Holmes does, but we give him the leeway because we know that he's on the spectrum, and he's just very observational. He himself would say he's a high-functioning sociopath. He's not a person that just happens to he doesn't try to socialize with people properly, and his default is to observe things to an overwhelming degree, which makes him essentially inherently a good detective. So you can there's a line you can walk where you do try to explain some of the abilities your character may have, but at times the audience will still give you leeway if the character is able to do things without a vivid explanation behind.
All right. So Otis, the question that I have for you then in regards to that same token, you brought up Sherlock Holmes. I'm not too familiar with a lot of the background of that character, but I do know he's an expert detective, and it seems like he just has a large expertise in that one area. Do you, Otis, believe that you can still be a Mary Sue even if you're not shown to be a fully faceted Mary Sue? I guess, like, is there a Mary Sue in a particular field?
So when it comes to Sherlock Holmes, he for sure is a Mary Sue. Just the fact, like, I mean, of course, like, he's a detective, but he's also a martial artist. He's a philosopher. He's
violinist.
A violinist. Like, he's able to do so many random things that he fits the qualification to a T. Now that I fully understand what this is, but I would just say, like, the requirement to make a good Mary Sue, in my opinion, is just to make sure that you do cover why they are this person. Like, you have to have the building blocks of how they got to these things. I mean, obviously, you don't necessarily have to start there. Like, if you have them, doing some type of feats of some kind, as long as you explain what they are later on, I'm okay with it. But you absolutely need to understand, explain why they are specialized in all these different aspects, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, to get back into my question in particular, do you believe that you can be a Mary Sue being it's like a savant in one particular, like if the show is about fighting and you are the best fighter in that show and you know every fighting technique, would you still be considered a Mary Sue?
No. Like, if you were a fighter and also a stellar businessman and, also playing instruments and you're a fantastic detective and all these things, like, that's a Mary Sue. But if you just are really skilled or really great at one thing, then you're essentially just a one-trick pony. Not necessarily in a bad way, but if I'm putting a term on it.
Okay. Just to narrow that down some, because I just wanted to make sure, because then again, you guys given the background on Sherlock Holmes, he again is probably very fully faceted. I was not aware of his backstory, but it started to seem like, at least from my understanding, that Mary Sues could be savants or experts in their field of expertise and still be considered that. But like you said,
not typically. Typically, they has to be able to do so many things that they're broken. Like you're kind of describing, like you said, a savant or a prodigy. They're good at one thing really, really well. Like in the movie Amadeus, it's all about Mozart, how he was broken when it came to playing music. He could do it since he was like the age of 2 or something like that. Before he could even speak properly, he was able to play music. You're a prodigy in one specific thing. Or if you get into like Baki Hanma, he's a prodigy at fighting. He's not really going to be able to talk politics or drive cars at light speed and not crash. But he's really, really good at fighting. And there's a kind of a story to that, essentially. So you can do different types of things in that regard. And oftentimes you will try to balance the scales. Like Superman, even though he has all kinds of crazy abilities and powers, he's clearly outsmarted over and over again by multiple opponents because he's not meant to be smart. He's meant to be of more or less average intelligence for the most part, but his body is broken. And by broken, I mean just very, very powerful.
Can you not be a highly intelligent and be the world's greatest detective though? Like for him to be able to
Superman.
Superman. Oh, my bad. I don't know why I heard Batman in my own head. I'm tripping. My bad.
That's all right, brother. That's all right.
I guess furthering down that path of a Mary Sue and what they are able to do or what they're supposed to be able to do, is there a criteria on what fields can it be any random assortment of things, or does there need to be physical, mental, spiritual, whatever else as far as social, or can it Mary Sue just have a random assortment of things they're great at, or does it need to be focused on particular areas?
Typically, it's plot based. It's if it's basically you throw the character into any scenario in the story and they manage to be good at it, that's the Mary Sue. So it could be like, say for example, with Wednesday, again, go back to Wednesday, you could have put her in a different environment and she could have completely crashed and burned. But at Nevermore, she seemed to have the skills that pretty much everything she encountered. Like she literally was able to outsmart I can't remember what that society was called when she was put there, and she went on. Yes. She was able to outsmart them. She was able to win a boat race with her ability. She was able to get into a fencing fight. She was able to kind of solve a mystery or try to solve a mystery, whatever. So it's like she was put in the environment that her skill set worked beautifully for it. That's typically what a Mary Sue is that the environment they're put into, they somehow have the skills for it to match it.
Okay. Do you guys have any closing remarks on just your thoughts on Mary Sues in general? We're starting to get to that time.
Bottom line is everything can be made better or worse with nuance. If your character is a character, you can be if they're a Mary Sue, if they're any other trope, they can be good, but they have to be individual. They have to like have their own personality traits that separate them from everything else. If not, then you end up with a bad character because it's just a trope.
Yes, I completely agree. And to kind of piggyback off of that, you can have characters that have lots of abilities later on in your story, or a character has gone on a hero's journey. Like, for example, Naruto in the Nine Tails, all the abilities he's able to use, all the abilities he's able to wield, they were earned because we're with him from the beginning when he had nothing, basically. Or even like Korra in the Legend of Korra, when she becomes a master avatar by the end of that series. If you have a character that's earned their stripes, the audience will go along with it a lot better than they will if you just have them broken from the start without explanation.
Fair enough. Well, guys, thank you guys for tuning in to another POI. This has been your co-host, Charlie of the Now Podcast. Thank you guys for your support. We hope for your continued support, and we will see you guys later.
Peach.